Yo, much peace. Big what up to everybody out there. Hope you're doing good. Chilling out. You know where you're at. This is FairGrow Australia coming through Thursday Thc Theatre. 31st of March. Last day of March. April 1st tomorrow. Season is kicking in for the Australians in the outdoor. Much peace, much power, much progress, and much bloom. Yeah, man. Hope you're all going good. Kicking in with that high grade, promoting the culture, kicking fire, and just trying to keep consistent with another episode, easy as. Kind of floating into just like again the impromptu realm, but I've like been watching this documentary of late. It's been pretty cool, so I thought I'd kick that on, and you guys can tell me what you think of it. But not that. It's pretty dope. BTP, what's up, my brother? I've been doing good, chilling. I'll play this video. I thought a bit of a different one. It's a pretty cool video. It relates to this guy's perspective on the culture in the past. Not this lady though. Started from the beginning. Might have seen it. People might have seen it, but I'll drop the link too. People want to come up and have a smoke.
Ganja.
Let's give thanks to the ganja gods, Shiva Bambalinat, for giving us this chance and giving us this beautiful flower. Let's learn about the history and the culture. Much peace to everybody. Thank you for coming through.
Cannabis in Greek, marijuana in Mexican, ganja in Hindi, or bhanga in Sanskrit, is known to many cultures around the world. But where was it first cultivated explicitly as a drug? In this video, I shall demonstrate how the ancient Indo-Europeans were instrumental in spreading this narcotic across Eurasia and how they used it in a ritual associated with the dead. And you will learn how the Scythians spread the plant to the Assyrians and the Jews, and that even the Vikings used it. Please be aware that cannabis use is linked to impaired attention and memory, and increased risk of psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia. Just because it was used historically in ritual contexts, that doesn't mean I'm endorsing its recreational use today. Cannabis is actually one of the first ever domesticated plants. The tough fibers of the hemp plant make strong fabrics, so the plant has often been spread not so it can be smoked, but so it can be worked into rope and other strong fabrics, which makes identifying the origins of its use specifically as a drug harder to pin down. Wild cannabis grows across many of the cooler mountain foothills from the Caucasus to western China, so we ought reasonably to presume the earliest use as a drug took place somewhere within or close to its native habitat. From the late Stone Age through the Bronze Age and up into the Iron Age, this region, known as the steppe, was inhabited by various Indo-European peoples, many of whom are known to have used cannabis in their rituals.
We are
Genetic evidence of the original domestication of the cannabis plant was published in a Swiss-Chinese paper by Wren and colleagues, and it indicates that rather than cannabis being originally domesticated...
I'll just stop it here for a sec. Yeah, you just have to excuse the ads that are coming through. Once again, I'll mention it. So it's Ancient Cannabis Cult history documentary. You can check it out on YouTube if you want. It's pretty dope though. Let's get it going.
On the steppes, it was actually first domesticated in East Asia, likely in early Neolithic China, some 12,000 years ago. The authors propose that cannabis was originally a multi-purpose crop until around 4,000 years ago, when it diversified into two specialized domestic strains, one becoming hemp, cultivated for strong fibers, and which produces higher concentrations of CBD, and the other cultivated for drug use and containing high levels of tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, and overall higher levels of psychoactive cannabinoids. 4,000 years ago was also a time when northwestern China was inhabited by Indo-European peoples from the steppes, and they, no doubt, are the ones who spread the plant westward. The new genetic data show that the hemp strain spread into Europe and the Middle East soon after it was developed, while the drug strain must have spread later, although a feral variant of this domesticated drug strain also spread on both the north and south side of the Himalayas in ancient times, indicating that it has an ancestor north of the must have spread later, although
I just wanted to stop that for a sec, just for a minute. Pretty cool. And I found it interesting how it's South America here. You can see up top on the I might be in the wrong spot, but the key saying the blue line, the red line, the triangle, the circle. There's obviously I'm always a little bit off.
After it was developed, while the drug strain must have spread later.
So the colder, what did it say? Oh, I'm not so deep. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is the South America, the Peruvian. Oh no, is that yeah? That's Peru. Most likely Chile is down here. So how they've discovered this like kind of on its own isolated strain there, to form in the South Americas is quite interesting. I don't know how deep it is, just to see, because the different variants. You've got the Asian one, European strain, but then out of here there's this a different drug type from Peru. But anyway, I'll get back into the thing. Much peace. Thanks for everybody coming through and joining us. The link is in there. You guys come up if you want, have a chill, have a smoke, but we'll just hope you guys learn a little. Not learn a little, but just like fucking resonate and listen to this info and find it interesting.
Variant of this domesticated drug strain also spread on both the north and south side of the Himalayas in ancient times, indicating that it has an ancestor north of the Himalayas. Relying on the historical record, we can see Indian texts refer to ganja explicitly as a drug from as early as 3,000 years ago. Specifically, the Atharva Veda calls Bhanga one of the 5 sacred plants which release us from anxiety and which is a source of the sacred Soma drink. Most of the spread of drug-type cannabis has happened long after that date. It reached Africa in the 13th century and Latin America in the 16th century. But what about the missing 9,000 years of potential cannabis drug use between the original domestication in East Asia and the Indian texts describing drug use? The earliest scientifically confirmed archaeological evidence for smoking cannabis is not very old either, just 2,500 years ago. Chemical analysis of burned cannabis remains from the Jirzhankal cemetery just west of the Tarim Basin in Xinjiang, China, suggests high levels of THC, the most psychoactive chemical in cannabis. The evidence was found in the form of 10 wooden braziers in which cannabis was burned, likely to be inhaled communally in a tent using a technique modern cannabis users call hot boxing. The typical smoking pipe is actually a Native American tradition which did not reach the Old World until the European colonial era.
That was quite interesting.
The ancient inhabitants of this region on the western border of China.
Really cool, but the fact how they said the initial findings were like people coming in a tent, filling up this basin, setting it on fire, and just like hotboxing, as he said, instead of like from a pipe and from a rolled up joint, something like that. So interesting to see how the connection started. Well, we didn't suppose it disinformation, but anyway.
Were not what we would think of as Chinese today. The mummies of the Tarim Basin are famous for looking more like white Europeans than Chinese people. The very oldest of them date to the Bronze Age, and new DNA evidence has recently proven that those aren't actually Europeans, but rather West Siberian hunter-gatherers who settled there. Although Indo-Europeans did settle in the Zungarian Basin just north of Tarim at the same time. And there were Iranic tribes to the west too, and both of these Indo-European neighbors eventually mixed with the Siberian hunter-gatherer people of Tarim, with the result that both Iranic and Tokharian languages, each originating in Europe, were spoken in Xinjiang province in China. And some of the later mummies and skeletons from the region have European ancestry, which explains why they look like Europeans. One archaeological site of the region is at Subeshi, on the north side of the Tarim Basin, consisting of a vast series of cemeteries at Yanghai, which date to around 900 BC. One of the skeletons from Yanghai is a Europoid shaman-like figure of the Jushi culture, with bells on his boots, who was buried with loads of cannabis, which, when analysed in 2008, was found to contain THC.
Amazing. I'll just stop him real quickly there just to get a little bit of commentary in. But the fact that he said 900 BC, so calculating that quickly, it's like 3,000 years ago. So, like, what's that? That's 100 generations, 3,000 years ago, and this guy's buried with flowers, which still, are containing THC in them. That's amazing, right? Just the heritage, the history, the human connection, just see this entity, this man or female, whatever, these people, and how they were living all that time, long ages, all those years ago, peacefully in harmony with earth and nature, still connected to this cannabis plant. So it's an amazing thing, as we all know. Once peace was getting go.
China Central Television made a documentary about the finds in 2016. Due to unique climatic conditions, many dried corpses of ancient humans were unearthed from the Yanghai tombs. There is one corpse of a middle-aged male, which is particularly eye-catching. This middle-aged man is certified to have lived 3,000 years ago. Compared to the Lulan lady, unearthed from Lop Nur, he lived 800 years later and also had the appearance traits of Caucasians. He was of a special identity, a Shaman Wizard of the ancient Yanghai people.
What do we have here? Yeah, here I thought we were special.
Those guys had nothing to do with the Chiba.
The leather-woven basket beside the man held marijuana seeds and leaves. More miraculously, when the leaves were unearthed, they were still green, as if freshly plucked. Together with fruits and little branches, they were perfectly preserved. To date, this is the oldest and best marijuana specimen in the world.
Amazing.
Experts believe that the marijuana found beside the Shaman Wizard was probably a hallucinogen used during sacrificial rituals held by the wizards for communicating with the gods.
Amazing.
It seems clear this cannabis was used for smoking, not just hemp rope, and the aforementioned braziers, dated to 400 years later and from the west side of the Tarim Basin in the Pamir Mountains about 1,000 miles away, support this conclusion. Before the shaman's burial, someone had carefully picked out all of the male parts of the plant, which are less psychoactive, providing yet further proof that the cannabis was here associated with drug use rather than textile manufacture. And this is not the only Jushi burial containing cannabis. The Jushi were a Caucasoid people who are believed to have spoken an extinct Indo-European language called Tokharian, You can learn more about the white mummies of China and the Tocharian language in my video on that subject. This video is sponsored by Blinkist. Life is short and there are too many books I want to read, but will never have time for. That's why the Blinkist app is so helpful. It condenses top non-fiction of Tarim were descended from the Proto-Indo-Iranic Andronova culture of Central Asia, dating from about 2000 BC to 900 BC, which also gave rise to all the Indo-Iranic or Aryan languages associated with India and Iran. The early Iranic-speaking peoples of the steppe were known as Scythians to the Greeks, and according to one Greek source, they also smoked cannabis. The Scythians were an Iron Age people who continued the equestrian steppe culture of their Bronze Age Andronovo ancestors. In the 5th century BC, Herodotus wrote of a Scythian funerary ritual in which heated stones were placed in bronze vessels along with cannabis, and the smoke would fill up their tents so that all the occupants would inhale the intoxicating fumes. The account is supported by the discovery of cannabis seeds in Scythian archaeological contexts. It is likely the seeds described by Herodotus were seeded buds, and that the charred seeds found by archaeologists in the Pazyryk burials are what was left over from the burnt buds. Herodotus also wrote that the Thracians, a Balkan race with close ties to the Scythians, introduced the plant to their neighbours, the Dacians, among whom it became a part of a shamanic cult named the Kapnobatai, or those who walk in the clouds. The shamans of this cult used cannabis smoke to induce divine visions. Etymological evidence seems to indicate that Scythians spread cannabis as a drug to many peoples. Our English words hemp and cannabis both likely come ultimately from Scythians. Hemp comes from an Anglo-Saxon word, hanep, meaning cannabis, which comes from the reconstructed Proto-Germanic word hanapis, which must have been borrowed by Germanic tribes from neighbouring Scythians more than 2,000 years ago. The same Scythian word was loaned into Greek and became cannabis, which also entered English via Latin. In the 90s, Russian scientists found the 2,400-year-old mummified remains of a tattooed Scythian noblewoman, who they named Devochka. Her body was dressed in a silk blouse, red skirt, a marten fur, and thigh-high white stockings, I say, and lay in a hollowed tree trunk alongside horse harnesses, a mirror, dishes, and a small container of cannabis. The presence of cannabis in burials like this reinforces Herodotus' account, which connects the drug to funerals. Perhaps the drug was used in a necromantic ritual to communicate with the dead. A Scythian barrow called Sengilivsko II in South Russia, close to the Caucasus Mountains, was excavated back in 2013. Inside were 2 large gold vessels placed upside down and several other gold items. Scientists analyzed residue from inside the gold vessels, and the results came back positive for opium and cannabis. Somehow, both drugs were used in a combined way, such that they left residue in the same, obviously very special, ritual containers. Local archaeologist Andrei Belinsky believes that the ornate imagery on the vessel...
That's something there, just stop there for a sec. There's something interesting too, coming across in my mind, like the effect that, using and smoking it out of different materials would have. I'm wondering, is there any, because obviously if you have it out of a toxic you burn it on something toxic, you're going to get fumes from that, which would be no good. Wondering if there's, because there's benefit in silver, in gold for our health. I wonder if there's any fumes that'll come off the gold at all, which would be beneficial. Just a thought. I'm just wondering, but anyway, let's get to it.
Vessels depicts the Scythian underworld. The Achaemenid Persians referred to some Scythians as Sakar Haumavarga, which means the Saka who consume or lay down Hauma. Hauma was both a plant and a ritual drink made from many ingredients in pre-Islamic Iran. It is usually identified with the stimulant ephedra, which was commonly used by steppe peoples and the people of the Tarim Basin, but also with cannabis.
So that's the
Carl Hoffman
basis
interprets
to
the
the
Varga suffix part of the compound Haumavarga to mean laying down in the sacrificial context of a ritual fire, so that Haumavarga means laying Hauma plants around the ritual fire. This seems to refer to the now well-proven Scythian custom of burning cannabis plants to inhale the smoke. Both the Persians and the Scythians spoke Iranic languages derived from those spoken by their ancestors of the Andronovo culture. On the southern border of the Bronze Age Andronovo territories of the Asian steppe was the Bactria Margiana culture of Afghanistan. The Russian archaeologist, Professor Viktor Saryanidi, excavated in this region and found 3 temple sites, which he believed were devoted to the preparation and consumption of the Hauma beverage. And he claimed evidence of cannabis, ephedra, and opium poppy in use in this context, preserved in fossilized gypsum and impressions in clay shards. He said that these excavations documentally proved that poppy, cannabis, and ephedra were used for making the Soma and Hauma drinks. In the documentary film Black Sands, he visits the site where the evidence was found.
It was believed that there had never been human occupation in this desert until the archaeologist Viktor Saryanidis started working here in Turkmenistan 40 years ago. Here in Gunur Tepe, ancient ritual practices have been identified, such as exposure of the dead and the preparation of hallucinogenic ritual drinks. Who were these people living here 4,500 years ago?
В этих сосудах клали эти растения, эфедру и каннабис. Это алкогольный напиток, но который не все пили, а только жрецы.
If you're in small business, normally you've borrowed money from the bank. You've normally given your house as security, and the banks are calling up those homes from.
Just a quick bit there, how the man was saying it's only for the priests. It was for the special people, accepted knowledge, I guess, and stature. They were the ones who were able to use it to gain that pathway and knowledge.
The pre-Islamic religion of Iran is called Zoroastrianism. Besides using the Hauma drink, Zoroastrians had other ritual substances to help invoke divine or shamanic visions. One of these was called mang or bang, which referred to several plants, including cannabis, but which now refers only to cannabis in modern Iran. In a medieval Zoroastrian story contained in the book of Arda Viraf, the pious hero Viraf is chosen to undertake a journey to the next world in order to prove the truth of Zoroastrian beliefs. In order to get there, he drinks a mixture of wine, mang, and hauma causing his body to sleep for 7 days and nights, while his soul travels to the other world. The journey depicted in the story likely reflects a wider necromantic ritual use of cannabis as a means to journey to the next world. Another descendant people of the Andronovo culture were the Aryan invaders of India, who entered the South Asian subcontinent around 3,500 years ago. You can see my video on the topic for more evidence of that. Just as the Persians use a ritual holy drink called hauma, which seems to have been made with cannabis and ephedra, the Vedic Indians had a similar sacred beverage called soma, and we also know they used cannabis, which they called bhanga, and that the drug strains of this plant were brought into India from north of the Himalayas. Soma is widely agreed to be related to hauma, and may also have been made using cannabis and ephedra. In fact, in the oldest Hindu text of all, the Rig Veda, bhanga refers not to cannabis, but to the soma drink, although this is often translated according to the root meaning of bhanga, which is to break apart, presumably referring to the psychological effect of cannabis which causes the user to disassociate from themselves. It seems very likely, therefore, that the sacred soma and hauma derive from a common source which contained cannabis. Therefore, we should reasonably deduce that domesticated cannabis cultivated for drug use was spread into Iran and India by the ancient Aryans of the Andronovo culture at the end of the Bronze Age, and continued to be spread around Eurasia by their Iron Age descendants, the Scythians.
I hope you guys are enjoying this. Just stop it for a sec. Yeah, it's not too, it's good info, fascinating. It's probably about 18 minutes. Just let us know if you want us to change in the chat. But this is dope. I watched this a few times now. I find it really interesting.
Even in modern India, ganja is either smoked or consumed in a milkshake called bhang lassi by devotees of the god Shiva, a god who they believe enjoys smoking cannabis himself. They share the cannabis with the destroyer god as prasad, that is, the shared sacrificial offering. In the shamanic Chinese poem of the Chu state called The Nine Songs, written about 300 BC, a goddess called Shao Siming offers a god called Da Siming, the Lord of Life, a twig from a plant called Shuma or Suma, at the eternal farewell. The first commentary on the Nine Songs was written 400 years later by Wang Yi, and he annotates the term Shuma as mythical hemp. This hemp was associated with an offering given to the Lord of Life, yet Shuma itself refers to the deity as well as to the plant offered to that deity. The exact same holds true for Soma in India and Hauma of Iran, for each refers respectively to a plant, a ritual drink made from that plant, and a god associated with that drink. Some have argued that Chinese Shuma was a word borrowed from Aryans of the Tarim Basin in western China, who made a drink from ephedra and cannabis from which both hauma and soma are derived. But there is a problem with that theory. Shuma is a compound word comprised of shu, meaning sparse or distant, and ma, which means hemp. Thus together they mean distant hemp, which is rendered as mystical hemp in accepted translations. Cannabis, as already demonstrated by genetic evidence, is native to China and was first domesticated there, and ma is used in inscriptions over 3,000 years old, so there is no need to propose that shuma is a loanword from Proto-Indo-Iranic at all. Ma is used to refer to other plants too. For example, ephedra was called mahuan, meaning yellow hemp. And during the Han Dynasty, the Chinese called sesame seeds and their oil hu ma, meaning hemp of the foreigners, while calling their own hemp Han ma, meaning hemp of the Han race.
That's pretty
And
trippy.
they also
That's
called
cool.
their own hemp huo ma, which means fire hemp, and that implies that they burned it, perhaps for ritual drug use. Huo ma sounds a lot like Haoma, and back in 1982, Manda Hassan proposed that the Iranic word Haoma derives from the Chinese Huoma or Huma, which he argued was transported by Aryan aesthetics into the Bactria Margiana region of Afghanistan as Hauma, while among the Aryans who took it to India, it became Soma in Sanskrit, since it is known that H mutates into S in the early Indic language. Manda Hassan devised this theory long before the genetic evidence of Iranic people in Western China was proven, or archaeological evidence of cannabis smokers in Jirzangkal Cemetery was discovered, and cannabis was identified in the Jushi shaman graves. This was also before genetics had confirmed the relationship between the Aryan invaders of India and Iran with the Iron Age mummies of Tarim and the Scythians. He relied only on linguistics, but his theory has been strengthened by all these recent genetic and archaeological discoveries. Besides the Indo-Iranic speakers, many other peoples in the ancient world used cannabis, specifically Semitic peoples of the Middle East. We can trace the spread of the plant through linguistics.
So it's another
The Indic word bhanga.
huge thing. I just want to stop there for a sec. You can see, as you just said, how it's how far spread. Like all these cultures, how long ago? It's like we're talking up to 3,800 years ago. They found that the female buried with female parts of the plant, so the flower with THC, and the THC was still existent within what she kept and what they dug up. So just from there, and just like all over the world, this it's spread. Use of it, it's amazing. So obviously you find it too. It's huge. Anyway, love this topic. Can we keep going?
Iranic, bang or mang were not the only Indo-Iranic words for cannabis. As already mentioned, the Greek cannabis cognate of English cannabis comes from an Iranic word related to the Persian word kanaf or kanab, which it seems the Persians, like the Greeks, took from the Scythians of the steppe. This East Iranic Scythian word is sometimes reconstructed as konaba. Kanab or konaba is also thought to be the source of kunubu, a word used in the cuneiform library of the Assyrian king Assurbanipal in the 5th century BC to describe a kind of incense. In a letter dated to 680 BC, sent to Assurbanipal's grandmother from a high priest who answers her question about which ingredients are used in the sacred rites, he replies, "The main items for the rites are fine oil, water, honey, odorous plants, and kunubu." The Neo-Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian words kunubu and kunabu are thought to mean a way to produce smoke, and are speculated to refer to cannabis. Similar speculation has long surrounded the biblical Hebrew term knir boshem, literally aromatic reed, which linguists variously identify as cannabis, lemongrass, or sweet cane. The Jewish God tells Moses to make a holy oil from myrrh, cinnamon, knir boshem, and cassia. Professor of Classical Studies at Boston University, Carl Ruck, claimed in 2009 that the Hebrew knir boshem is the same Scythian word that Herodotus wrote as cannabis, and that large amounts of it were compounded into the ointment for the ordination of the Hebrew priest, who would inhale the incense inside the temple.
The word cannabis is a Greek assimilation of the Scythian word, and other cultures have assimilated as well. The Hebrew version of it is kannamoso. Cannabis was the ingredient in the incense that the high priest entered the enclosed tent, like the Scythian fumigation tent of the.
Just I'll stop and quick. It's interesting, like as they said, they made the oil for the priests and stuff. It really intrigues me to see how, obviously they would have had copiers and copious amounts on hand. Not sure, obviously it would have been high grade and whatnot, but the amount that they could have put into this oil to make it so potent, it would have just been interesting to find out. I'm sure they would have made it highly potent, and then when they walk into these tents, it would have been just dense smoke. So the amount of dosage they're getting would be pretty high, I presume. I would like to know that.
Of the inner tabernacle. And in that enclosed space, he saw Yahweh materialize, doing the covenant with the deity, the highest sacrament of the religion. And it was induced by a vision, accessed by cannabis.
His claims could perhaps be dismissed as wild speculation, were it not for recent archaeological evidence from Israel. In 2020, at Tel Arad, near Jerusalem, archaeologists took samples from the altars of an 8th century Jewish shrine, first discovered in 1962. The organic residue from the 2 limestone altars was tested and determined to contain burnt cannabis and frankincense. This is the first time that cannabis has been scientifically identified in the ancient Near East, but many believe it was used by Hebrews and other Semitic peoples much earlier, and they point to the words kunabu and konaboshem as evidence. If they are right, then it seems likely the plant was introduced to Semitic peoples by the Persians or the Scythians in the Iron Age. However, there is also evidence that cannabis was spread not only by Iranic Aryan peoples in the late Bronze Age and Iron Age, but also by their Proto-Indo-European ancestors of the Eastern European steppe thousands of years earlier. Back in 2017, a study by Teng Wenlong and colleagues from the Free University of Berlin argued that cannabis was domesticated in the West by steppe peoples at the same time it was domesticated in China. They argued, using archaeological evidence, that the Proto-Indo-European steppe peoples, such as the Yamnaya, spread the cannabis plant. This facial reconstruction by Robert Molyneux shows you what the Yamnaya people looked like. However, the genetic study from this year proves all domesticated cannabis comes from a single East Asian domestication event, thus disproving the multi-regional theory, despite it relying on a database of cannabis in the archaeological record, which shows cannabis was widely distributed from as early as 10,000 years ago, or even earlier. The conflicting archaeological and genetic evidence has not been conclusively resolved yet. The Yamnaya culture began over 5,000 years ago and spread as far west as Hungary. One Yamnaya grave at Gurbenesti in Romania contained a clay vessel with what is thought to be carbonized hemp seeds. If so, likely the earliest evidence for the burning of cannabis. The British archaeologist Andrew Sharratt argued in 1995 that the Yamnaya invaders first introduced cannabis smoking to the Danube Valley. He also claimed that the even older steppe culture of Sredny Stog in Ukraine, which is probably the original Proto-Indo-European culture and dates back over 6,000 years, used cannabis as a socially approved intoxicant, celebrating its significance by imprinting it on their pottery. he was referring to corded impressions on the clay vessels of the Sredni Stog culture, which he argued represented hemp cords. He also pointed to the presence of burning braziers in Bronze Age European cultures, which are sometimes described as incense cups, as a continuation of a steppe tradition of burning cannabis in braziers. An argument he made long before the discovery of the 2,500-year-old Iranic cannabis braziers from Xinjiang in China. This brazier, or Peraunos, was made by people of Hungary's Copper Age Bodrog-Keresztür culture, which is considered to be Indo-Europeanized by neighboring steppe cultures. This one is from the nearby Karnavoda culture, whose pottery was influenced by the corded ware of the Sredni Stog culture on the steppe. While this brazier was found in a Yamnaya barrow near Mikhailovka in the Volga region of South Russia, as were these ones. The Belbika people were related to Sredni Stog and Yamnaya people, and Belbika finds from near Stonehenge include numerous so-called incense burners, such as the Stonehenge incense cup you see here. Was this cup used by an early British shaman to burn cannabis? Sharat wrote, "The realization is gradually dawning on archaeologists that such practices, widespread in the ethnographic record, are inherently likely to have existed in prehistoric times. It seems entirely probable that in their practices and associated mythology, the societies of Aboriginal Europe were smoking cultures. Conclusive evidence that Belbika people used cannabis was found near the global capital of cannabis itself, Amsterdam. In 2012, analysis of the pollen from plants strewn within a Belbika tomb at Hattemerbroek in the Netherlands, dated between 2459 and 2200 BC, contemporary with the Stonehenge incense cup,
5,000
revealed that they were almost certainly cannabis. Once again, we see a connection between cannabis and an Indo-European funeral ritual that long before the Iranic people emerged.
Now there'll be no more fear, and the road is clear, the sky is clear and gray.
Although conclusive study of the THC content of cannabis from these early Indo-European finds has not been possible, as it was for the braziers of the Girizankel cemetery, we should not conclude that cannabis was never used as a drug prior to 500 BC, or that its earliest use was limited to East Asia. The archaeological record clearly demonstrates that the tradition of cannabis use has roots in the earliest Indo-European cultures. As the authors of the exhaustive Encyclopedia of Indo-European Culture have noted, there are at least 3 chronological horizons to which the spread of hemp might be ascribed. The early distribution of hemp across Europe during the Neolithic, around 5000 BC or earlier, a later spread of hemp.
Just stop it quickly for a second. There's one point, like, kind of, it's my opinion based, but throughout this kind of throughout the video, he's been referring it to, the textile use and the drug use. Now, the term that he's using, the drug use, it's a little bit, I don't know, it hits me the wrong way because it's very stigmatic. People have a perception on drug use, and I don't really think it falls into place. I mean, you could categorize it, there's health benefit to it, there's ritualistic, there's cultural, so it could even be a food or a fruit, because it's a seed, it's a herb, a vegetable, or because, if you take like vitamin C supplements, or anything, just for example, is that a drug? Would you consider that a drug? Like, in the same form, like, because it probably is. It depends what you classify drug as. Is it a substance that's, going to give you some sort of benefit, or is it just stimulate you from reality to escape? So I don't know, but it's just it's my my little thing there. We'll get onto it.
Of hemp for presumably narcotic purposes around 3000 BC, and a still later spread, or at least re-emergence of hemp in the context of textiles during the first millennium BC. We see the ancient Indo-European association of cannabis with funerary rituals was continued into more recent times with pagan cultures of the Celts and Vikings. Early Celtic use of cannabis has also been identified through pollen analysis of a bowl from a rich woman's grave of the late Hallstatt period at Niedererbach in Bavaria. Cannabis use dating to 500 BC was also identified at another Hallstatt site at Fürstengrab of Hochdorf near Stuttgart. The famous 9th century Viking boat burial at Oseberg in Norway, an Indo-European style barrow in which a grand Viking ship was interred, now kept in the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo. In the boat were the bodies of 2 women, the younger of whom was of a high social status, wearing expensive clothes, indicating that she had probably been a queen. She also had a purse which contained cannabis seeds. It has been proven that hemp was grown for textiles in that region of Norway for at least 200 years by the time she was buried, and hemp cordage was widely used by the Vikings. But this burial contained no hemp fabrics or cords at all. Therefore, in light of the aforementioned Indo-European cannabis funeral rituals, we can reasonably assume that these Viking seeds were related to a ritual use of cannabis as a drug rather than a fabric. In other Indo-European rites, it is clear that cannabis was associated with the dead, the world of the dead, and also with gods like Shiva, who, like his devotees, sits in the smashana or cremation ground, surrounded by death, and is called Lord of Smashana. Many scholars, beginning with Georges de Musil, have connected the cult of Shiva to that of Odin among the Vikings. Both were associated with the dead, with burial grounds, and with male devotees who lived outside societal norms, like a wolf pack. The presence of cannabis in this Viking ship burial demonstrates yet another Indo-European connection between East and West. Do take a look at some of my other videos on ancient Indo-European religions,
Pretty
genetics, and folk
trippy.
customs
That was a really
if you
cool
want
way
to
to
learn
end
more.
that, actually.
And
Ooh.
don't forget,
Where we at? Because I didn't really. I've
levels
watched this a
of
few times,
tetrahydro.
and just the fact that he said the connection, the old ancient connection with the East and the West, like, just made me think kind of the new governmental structure. Obviously, it would have partaken back in the day, in its existence, but it's the complete separation between the link of us all. See that guy in the position he was in, this meditation. Probably the whole world was on this path and this realm, this kind of mind state. And that's, we all understood it and connected us, because we all kind of do now. And if we are able to find that within our own mind and connect and feel that connection and feel that response and that natural ability, that says a lot in itself. So, and then all the thing, basically, what you're doing on the 9 to 5 to partake and stay within the realm of government and like all society, pay your registration, pay your tax, pay your rent, pay your mortgage, all sorts of things like that. That's the diverting your energy into that element, which is foreign, that you don't recognize naturally, as opposed to this, that meditative state, which you do find connection in. It's consistently there, driving you away, keeping you in that line and that form. And it's easy to say, because this is how it's running, and a lot of people are in that frame, and it's that's just how they're supporting themselves. But I just don't think I can easily find that connection. But it's cool. So anyway, that's a hell interesting documentary. I do really think if you guys had any sort of interesting thoughts or whatever, let us know. I'll drop the link in the chat if anybody wants to come up for a second and have a chat, have a talk. Really appreciate everybody hanging around. I'll probably keep it up for a little while if nobody comes up, just another 10 minutes or so. It'll be an hour. But yeah, man, like the culture, yeah, the plant is amazing. It's been there. It's been around. What's the news? News in yeah, everybody's around harvest time, I guess, so that's cool. And I guess Western Australia, I wonder if the people in Western Australia are going to be on the further back, because the timeline, I guess, East Coast people who harvest have been already in action a few weeks ago. And I think the projection of the sun or like just the longitude, whatever it is, time zone stuff we get a bit further back. I'm wondering, does that continue on? So the people in Western Australia should be still a couple of weeks behind. But yeah, most blessings fully to everybody doing it. I'm so blessed to come through, have the first run going. Things are looking okay, looking good. Anxious because, just researching, trying to find what it is, what I'm trying to look for, how I can make it better. There was obviously some little hurdles and stuff I had, but that's part and parcel. It's good to go learn with and grow with. Yeah, man, just looking forward to it. And there's still a long, long way to go. It's a really crucial part. You've done all this work to get a good bloom to this stage. You need now to cut it, cure it, and keep it. I guess you want to keep these terpenes, and there's a lot of steps that can go wrong. So, and it just takes practice, I guess. The more practice you do, the better you'll get at it, the more relaxed you'll be. Thank you, bro. Thank you, Slippy. Okay, but it's the coolest thing. I really can't wait for if they do come through with the 6 plant allocation allowance for the people with that thing that has come. We got main man in the back, Hookster, Smoke Screen TV. Did you check it out? How are you, bro? You can hear me?
G'day, mate. I can hear you, mate. Is my camera not working? Oh, yeah, it's working. I was looking on the YouTube screen. How are you, Fair? Good show, mate. Good show.
Yeah, it's all right. Cheers. Fucking interesting. I've been watching that a couple of times. You haven't seen that before?
Oh, yeah. No, I've seen a little bits of pieces of, but it's better watching it here. So,
Okay.
it's like watching everything for the first time when you come to the first channel.
Yeah.
I just bought these biodegradable. It's like a mullah. Oopsie. Biodegradable though. It's all biodegradable. Got this like a tin.
Wow.
And a bowl, all biodegradable. So
wow.
I'm testing it out. I might give one out soon. But yeah, cool. $20.
Made from all like natural shit that'll you can put in the dirt and it'll blow. Wow, nice one.
Can I pack one up?
That's what people got to think about.
Really Fair?
Yeah.
Are you smoking?
Yeah. I got it. I'll chop up. Oh no, actually, I'll just pour some out of this.
No working florries, mate. Yes.
I went to try and get a loop today. I'll obviously have to get one online. I went to this like local watch jeweler shop and I asked him. He said, "Nah, don't have them. I don't know where you'll get one. Can we get a line?" Only thing is like, I'll probably be cutting them, well, half of them at least, before I get the loop.
What's that? What do you mean?
The jeweler's loop.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Well, a quick way to get one, cheap one is the magnifying glasses for your phone. So you can click on the phone. They're about $10.
Okay.
They're about $10. In most mobile stores, they'll have them. They just click on the phone. I've got a couple of those around I use, but you want the proper one. You want the one that folds out, don't you? To look.
I don't really, something that's just going to be like 50 times zoom, really, I think. I had a bit of the read up, and it says you don't want like 100's overkill, but obviously it's good for the photos, but it's not necessary. I'm not too sure anyway. It's not possible to check with your eye at all to see any. It is?
Once you get to once you know what you're looking at, you just look at the plant and you know straight away.
Okay.
Just,
Yep.
You could even take a photo and then zoom in on the photo.
I've tried that.
Yeah.
It's still
a good
clear.
way to do it, take a photo at night with the flash.
Okay.
And that way it'll give you a lot. You can really zoom in and have a suss. But you will see it with the eye.
Yeah, it's a trippy one, eh? I mean, I guess it's just the first. As you said, you'll get used to it. You'll see it. You'll be like, okay, that's that. Just for me, the first time, I'm just like a bit anxious, and I'm obviously thinking the worst. Being like, oh shit.
Got nothing to worry about. Anyway, it's like at least you could do is pull it a little bit early at this point, which is not very early.
Yeah.
I mean, I could harvest some and be happy.
So also one other question is, so what about what I'm looking at the crown and stuff and seeing like white pistils still coming out. There's a lot of orange ones and brown ones, but there's still the white ones at the top. Should that matter? Should they be all completely gone, or you could still pick them now?
There's probably still, probably might still be growing, but
I
mean, you put it in a pot, so it'd be further along than mine.
Okay. It stopped to stretch. I definitely saw it still stretched for a while there, and but now it's stopped at that position and it's now fattening up. But it's not fattening up as quickly as the others, and what I've thought. So I'm worried that it's just going to be thin.
Look, you can harvest it now. Yeah, you're not gonna. It's just a learned thing. Don't expect any more than what it is. Like one thing that people think is anything going to happen, and usually you're probably at the point where you know that you're stretching it to the end. It's in the pot. I would say
it's shiny. I can see shit all over it, so I know that if I cut it now,
glistening.
it's still gonna be alright. Yeah.
So no worries. Test a nugget.
Yeah, I'm thinking I might, but and as we were at that full moon, I was, definitely gonna cut half of one of them.
Yeah.
Hang it upside down. So fuck yeah. So go to Office Works, get it macrolens. I'll check that out tomorrow. Because I said before, I did want to do it kind of as naturally as possible and just do it by eye, do it by look for the first time. And, I've let one do what it does. The other one I topped and stuff. But anyway, it's just
I love playing around in the winter fair because they never get big. In the winter time, they're always just slower and smaller, and you can sit there and watch them, and you can just have a few more instead of being worried about having them get too big, and you can easily rip them up. That's why I love having fun over the winter.
What about? Have you ever tried? There's interesting like there's you do it in a bucket. It's like you're only going to get a tiny plant. They put a light on the top of the bucket. It's for people, I guess, that don't have access to spaces to grow.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they fucking nicknamed it, but it looked pretty interesting. But you're only going to get half of that, like really small amounts.
Yeah.
Probably not worth the time, eh? You're wasting the seed.
Yeah. I don't know. I suppose it's better than nothing. When you got no weed, you think, geez, even the smidgiest plant would do.
We'll do that.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Fall on, brother.
Yeah, right. I'll do it. Yeah, it's been an hour, so I'll do it. Fucking peace to everybody. Thanks for hanging around. Thanks for coming up, bros.
And I can't find my lighter, so. Oh, yeah.
Here we go. High grade.